Ochijana, ja takushnisti lana ni jipazo kutacha, ja trokat takya takushnisti waglanitahan, ja ama nuki wok isha wok kapit. Ashtka wachik ya wakapit. Ja wakantaka apeti ushteni yakunka the wonsteki lana onkenna taku kiksiyana wach walon peach trokate gemoni pikte. Woyeki na wakanchacha woychikana wakan. Inkacha trokate ke harmoni piktanka. Niecha wakantaka lana oyaki. Diabetic, Musha, what you go a garden calendar, you have the Timahi picking and another, and oi checking, warble as the killer, walk up again, walks up again, and check. Yana, I will never watch it. Ja, erstmal, trocker, woje na, owaje erstmal, ja, skampi. Ja, trocker, wakaje, hipchashna. Le Matuwe kiŋ Slolwakiye. Matuwe kiŋ Slolwakiye. Ashta hoch. Yukjana hier. Matuwe kiŋ Slolwakiye. Ashta washitya. Individual and social identity. Apeti yoila. Oko topa na apeti trokai num yamni topa zakta lana ya lako voichina voyekilena lashkapi. Ashana ja vichasha nuya ekta iabe. Ashna hachji lakho wogla kapshni nai takushti okachre kapshni. Ash abeti oila ashna. Dokishki iluk junkie na wakantna ka ijana onkapik. Če ashna jekta čašta očeke ja kaharna. Abete ilpta tukšata ja meni dikta. Če leti maja hiv čašna, da ja mačija kapi. Na da ja hivi. Matuwe kiŋ tukša očiče kapite. Na nituwe kila tukša niža jaka. Ja, hoch nach Chiwogla kapshni na checha. No gach na kapshni. Ash hetchen na lakholia waglok. Cha togaya ke. Togaya ke ashna. Daya yahi. Daya machiam kapi. Oya. Ashta yukcha. Chatyata duayinash. Niti ekta katota nantimai yukta. Wangwe wachiato. Daya wachiato bi ota pantas. Daya yahi. Hayacha. Lena insha tyata lena ichanabi. Chadaku inichiabi. Lakota jenki wanji luha hantash Oglakaye. Honch Yuhamna honch Yuhabshni. Dakwe honch Yuhabshni kihana Yukchapi. Na Isha Heapsa. Dakwe Lakota janji luhashni. Slash. Ganina aten ina jiamala owoglaka. Dakwe Lakota janji luhashni. En toen vertelde je aan Tiger. Daarna als dat Hogaya hiep chashna owoglaka. Toen ken je daar. Ogo yamni lena tlahanshtam tokish owoglaka tapu. Slolwakiye bentana. Kindashna aket, glinashna. Okay. So go yamni mahan kihani trashna. Washi wana Slolwakiye ya. Chaje mi prati tukdeta hikia la kochashki. Tuktel watiki na tukdeta hawahiki lena Slolwakiye. So tuktel ya I chashna tuak chiwagla chashna lena ashna. Iniu kap chashna daya chal obwagla kikta duiki. Dokishki lukjana chate da. Nagini traki na trajanki da. Dayashna opicha. Ahani helpsa. Chadam wagla kikile daya wagla kikta. Ilukdak ilukta. Ash troka ash na mochike da. Elena Owashi Chama Chache El Miela Kolia Ashton Owag Lakina El Leisha Mospe Chakina Dakushishni Yihashna Op Shkam Vichasha Miyak Ash. Just sitting Book College. El Yihawashi Chum Chuk. Chamuch ashna kiksir nahuch daya woglaka. Nahuch ake dani Slolwakiye nish wet kiksiapsh. Ash tuha abetu Hogaya na abetu yamni chash ehanshna lena o woglaka. Cheshna watam manto Don chashna ishkia timahilna. Oh, lenas mana Slolwakiye. Lala nanjina. Ish atenina, ish lekshi etmoy. Lena o watlak. Lena umakeka. Abedi yohi la timahil chashna nagun. Ya trakatokcha. Mashte ish. Tratena ish. Hina ashni iwoglak. So ashna daya woglaka. Yushkian woga. So ekta lena ashna o woglaka trokaya timahib chashna. So pina handoksha. The dagu glila ota yiha chacha doksha. Ena iwoglakikta. Matuwe kiŋ doksha I. Check up.
Since everybody's beyond 6 feet from me. LaValla Matuwe kiŋ was on LaValla you saw up there earlier, I was a preschool teacher for a number of years. I graduated from Snow College 2012 with the big program. That's Lakota language education. What was that age? Something program. So that helped me learn the language and how to teach the language, to understand the dynamics of the local language. So when I did that, then I took that, then I went back to Head Start. So I worked at Head Start for a couple more years. Knowing that I can do this now and the language was really awesome. So this is my daily routine. Every day we start with the flag song. We bring in the staff, do the flag song. We do our attendance, whoever's here, who isn't here. We look outside to see what it is outside. We keep track of the weather, so we figure out, well, yesterday was raining. Tomorrow we're going to guess what it might be. And then we do shapes, numbers, colors, our ABC sound and recognition. And then we reintroduce this lesson for the week. So I usually start with a story. So these are the books I used for this theme. This is my tribe theme. First one is Tatanka and Lakota people. The next day is White Buffalo Woman, and the next day is Buffalo Dreams. And we end with the Legend of the Standing Rock. I'm just nervous. So day one, we've done family trees before, so this would be like a review for them. This is like later in the year. So it would be a review, and then what I would try to do a week before is try to get the families to give me their pictures, so the kids have something to relate to themselves. And it's really, they really like to see their own family with their own family's pictures. So this one would be working with the Kinship system. And if they didn't have it, I had something for them to work with. So this would be the boys, and this would be the girls. Kinship system. And then they decorate their own TV. So I'm trying to work ahead and to prepare for the next lesson. So sometimes you have to do your own activities. So it takes time for things to dry in a preschool classroom. So the next day we come back and we do TV. So I have a big, huge one, but I just brought this one with me. And then so we talk about what's inside a teepee, and you know how where the men sleep, where the women sleep, where the children sleep. What's in the teepee, you know, where the fire is. Then we talk about what usually happens in a teepee. So they keep their supplies and stuff like that. So I have cards to help me remind me of what we can talk about. So they cook in there, and they keep their supplies, and they tell stories, and they sleep on buffalo rolls. So the activity they're going to do is they have to cut and paste. So at preschool, you're doing a lot of fine motor stuff. So this is the background. This will go on the construction paper. And I would cut these out individually, and they would glue them where they think it belongs. And then this one is cut in half, so you can like open it and see what is inside it. So that's one activity. While still working on the next one. And then, so I'm going to do working on the TVs. The next day is Richoti. So this is the next other activity that they decorate the ones on the wall. I have a wall where it's another, where you can visually see how things are getting put together. So once we do that, then we show how the family's set up. So I take the ones that they created, and we gave one of these. So this is where Sam lives. And in a regular campsite, and then you're camped by your own relatives, right? So here's the staff, so I take all their individual teepees, and I say, well, and next to Sam, his Unchi and LaValla stay there, and then his aunties, and then if they have brothers, older brothers, they have so this is their choti, right? So I go on, and then they have to color, right? Color their own families' teepees. And then we work our way up to Slolwakiye, where they have a group of them, right? And we have a small community, so a lot of them are already related. So we kind of, well, okay, so since Sam, grandma lives over here, she also is staying with their cousin, Eleanor. So they kind of live next to each other. So we kind of talk about relatives and where they live. I'm trying to calm down here. And then I try to incorporate math as well. So this is Oyanke, so they have to match the numbers with the teepees, and where we have what is our community now, right? Now it's Oyate. All our students' family all live in a community, so now it's Oyate. Oyanke. And then I wanted to throw in what is a community, right? So the first thing we do is I went around the community and got pictures of their own houses, and then they glue on where everybody lives. So they know whose house we stop at first, and then whose house we stop at second, and then throughout the community, right? Then later I go and I took pictures of all of what we have in our community. So we have churches, post office, we have community buildings, right? We did have a store. And hologram, where that's at. So they have a sense of where our community is. So now, I can do this with one hand. Since we have that, now I represent that with this. So I'm from Ian Chupashke. So now I represent this symbol as Ian Chupashke. This is bullhead. This is where we're at. But we live on Standing Rock, so we have a map of Standing Rock here. So I placed these where each one of our community is. So LaValla. And they've been to most of these communities because they go to PAL, their parents go to PAL. So they've been to where a majority of these communities are. So I placed these on here. It's hard to do upside down here. My toe, running that little kennel for AIDS. So your activity is to, and we're going to start learning about who she is, right? Ina Wasla. So they're going to glue all these communities, right, symbols around this, okay? Then I come back again. Then I replace this symbol, community symbol, with this symbol. And I replace all of them. So, cannibal. But I take all this off and put them, these teepees on it, right? Oops. I take all those off, put these on her. Go ahead. Little eagle. Control. Ian Chifishkin. take each one of those teepees that represent that community on here. And what we essentially did was our symbol, standard rock symbol. And you've seen this before around the community. So that was Slolwakiye. So as you can see, each day they did their own activity. And the bottom are my goals for Head Start. We have standards. So those are my goals. Keep going. Fine water, counting up to 5 sticks. Again. And there's that teepee. So that teepee, it's each pole is color coded. So depending on which pole goes up first, the numbers are on the white part here. And it's color coded, so you have to find those sticks with that color on the tip. And you start with that pole, those poles. So we did that whole process there. And there's the activity where they glue the pieces on with teepee. So again, math, you have to count, this one. And then the decorating the teepee, because that's for the next activity. Next one. And then this is Michoti, where the relatives stay, they have to decorate. Next one. And then the extended family, the Slolwakiye, and you're sorting the colors. Okay, next one. And there's a community one, and then what the community is. Next one. And then there are the symbols for that community, and then how it's on the map. Next one. And I swap those out where they put it on the symbol for Standard Rock. Okay, next one. And then we do the book last. So this is the book I created, and so we read about her, and then we make bracelets or necklaces or earrings, and we take a trip to Standard Rock and we give it to her as a gift. As you can see, you can actually see how she's sitting there, right? Next one. So as you see, I started out with what they know. Preschool kids, when it comes to school, even at 3 years old, they already know a lot of knowledge, and you're just starting with what they know. So you got the Tiwahe, Chiyekchega, Chia, Michoti, Slolwakiye, Moyake, and Oyate. So I built from something they already know and added what I wanted them to know what is a tribe. Okay, next one. This is my process, I guess, of trying to come up with things. I have a topic, right? I have to do research because I need to find things that I know I need them to know. The material is kind of hard because a lot of it you can't find out there, so you're pretty much creating your own. So the little teepee thing, I had to do that on Microsoft Word and make each line and each symbol and each circle and oval. I had to do that all by computer. Once you get one basic one, then you can shrink, blow up, where you need it. My goals of Cheti Shakomi, I use that as my standard, as well as the preschool Head Start standards. Vocabulary, I gotta get my vocabulary for each item and whatever goals that is for that activity. My lesson, then the activity itself for them to do. And my assessment is based on how they put things together by themselves. Next one. And how I know that in areas when I think it's too much for them to know, all I have to do is wait, because they play those out in their learning centers. They know where to put stuff. Next one. Got it?
Explain those real quick.
Huh?
Can you explain that real quick?
What's that?
What you're doing there?
So the first day, just had these little Indians and just generic, I guess, Indians and cowboys and stuff. I put those out. They pretty much play with whatever they want. But once we started learning what they were, Then I put these other symbols out, and they started putting those houses where they belong, where the horses, where everything goes in that community. They're drawing on TVs, or have stuff in the writing area, their fine water area, and they have books of Lakota, native books, I guess, in the library. And then that's my wall. At the end of the theme, that's what it'll look like at the end of the theme. We gotta open the other PowerPoint. Okay, so I did a creation story with them, with the preschoolers, and connected it with Star Knowledge. So this is my word wall. My word wall, this is everything I need to work on a daily basis. So we got our weather, our numbers, we go with numbers, the day, our alphabet, the months are up there, our colors. We do our attendance, whoever's here, who isn't here, and then whatever we're working on that month. So in a creation story, I did this in January, so they already built up enough language to do this activity. We had like a week to do the theme, and then so I start every lesson with telling the story in Lakota, and then they do that activity for that page, and then I printed it so where it's a plannable story, where they can tell the story on their own in the learning centers. And then have the book available in the library. So each page, so they're creating their own book. So based on the page, they're putting together that, the face, I guess. They're cutting and pasting that part on there, so the eyes, the nose, the mouth. They're gluing each individual thing on their own page. Next one. So they know who is Eon and why she's sad. You know, we talk about something she did and what he did. You know, so all that is visible and hands-on. Next one. We learned about and what makes her. There's Eon there's water, and then the sky, the sky. And then what else happens? Like he has a lot of powers. So each one, again, they have to cut and glue and paste everything on there. Next one. And again, we keep going. And if there's an activity where you can come up and put other ideas on there, so keep going. So like where she's still mad, right? When Chinko, that's because she's hot. So she was asking him to do something about it. It's going to do something about it. The next one. So the one up there, so that became our night and day. You know how it became night and day. And at the end, remember, he makes other beings and how they made their own beings. Okay, next one. So there's a flammable story where they told that they can do on their own. And when we finished, I laminated their books, and they got to take their books home. The next week we did space, so we connected what we learned about creation story and how space was created. So we did a lot of activities for what's out in space. Okay, next one. So in my learning center, I set up a space station. So we have the rocket ship, and then we had a whole computer. So I just printed out stuff I can find on the web that has like space stuff or mountains, computer stuff, and Black area, they built their on the moon or on the Mars mission or something. And I did have like telescopes and stuff in the science area, and then I have a lot of books on space, and I also have books on constellations. So I went back to the creation story, right, and reminded of how the sun and the night and day switches back and forth. So I found this thing at Walmart, and once I found out what it does, I incorporated it in my lesson. So I'll show you that. And then so we also have to do activities. So we decorated the tree to represent each season. That's probably one of our activities. In this one. So here's that thing I found at Walmart. Like if you click on the picture on the left. So this is the stages of the moon on there, and how she changes. So it shows where the sun is, where we are, the earth, and then how the moon goes around us. You can click on the next one on the right. And then that's how seasons change, right? We go around the sun, and that's how we get winter, summer, fall, and spring on that one. So they can visually see this on the learning center. Next one. So after we decorate all the trees, I put them up on the ceiling and then divided it to each seasons, and then that way it's another visual of how time changes. And then we also did constellations. So I took what I can find, right, all the Lakota constellations, and we did activities out of them. So there's the star quilt design, we did one of those, and they had constellations, and that's the great spirit being, the teepee that he lives in, and we decorated that. The Rocky Way, we did that. And we also did the season one over here on the bottom, and then we also did the, can't remember what that one is. So one on the bottom, and then we also did the stories. One of the stories, we had to put them in order, so they have to match again the numbers with what happened first in the story. So now we're gonna go to, now I teach at the college and I do language 101, 102, 211, and 212. So she does also the 101. Right now I'm doing 101 for high school. Okay, next page. So for me, time clause is like the hardest thing to teach. And so we learned time clauses in the first six weeks, I think. And who all knows the hungry caterpillar? You guys know that one, the hungry caterpillar? That has like the basic sentence structure that you can work with. It has a time clause in it, right? And it tells about you have your math, right? How it modifies the subject, and then what he does with it, right? So that has a basic sentence structure for a time clause. So I used that. So we did a hungry caterpillar, and all they do is swap out, right, the vegetable, the fruit, right, that first lesson. Then the next one, I told a story of how the hungry caterpillar went to a powwow, and all the stuff he found over there to eat. But again, he had the time clause, right? Instead of the day, we swapped out the time clause with the hour. So again, the hours is still there, the time clause still there. So at that time, right? And then what he ate, and then so that's getting swapped out. And then since we have that sense structure, now we work with other things. So that we have what happened at a certain time of day, right? So you have to like figure out what day you're talking about. So we have a question and response that we practice every day just to get us to talk and know that sense structure. So if I ask you something, you can answer back. So we do a couple of those. Next page. And then we put activities. Now we're switching out the activity part of it, what we did on that day. So we're learning about hihani, abetikile, hihaniki, and ashtama. So we're just working with those 3 time clauses. And then we added a 1L or a 1, depending on what it is, right? Either it's general or specific. So then we added that concept there. So again, the sentence is getting more complicated as we go. Okay, next one. So then now we're going to go beyond yesterday and tomorrow. Now we start learning about kuheha and kiha. When you start using those, and that blew my mind. But I asked her one day, well, how do you know how to use it? Once she told me that, and then I figured out, oh, okay, cool. It will go here. So then we start using that same set pattern of asking each other and responding back with that structure. And now we have that sense of time, right? When we start using kuhaha and kiha. Next one. And then we move beyond that. Now we're talking about last week and next week. So again, we're building and having that time concept even further away from Untitled, right? So we practice a few more of those. So now we have, hecta, right? And then we can always swap in the day, right? The ogo, how many weeks, right? And then our activity of what we're doing on that day that we're talking about. Next one. And then we have to do future tense, right? Now you gotta listen to the difference between like doha and doha, right? When somebody is talking to you, then we're talking about tukata, meaning next week. And then listen for kta, right? Now we're talking future tense. Okay, next one. So once we start working with all the different possibilities of swapping, the day, we talked about last week, our last Sunday, what we did on that day, or week, then we moved on to month, right? We can swap that, put that in there now, or we can talk about the year, and then we can also talk about the season using this sentence structure. So we did our oral examination with this. So I had to ask them a question, and while they're looking at this, they had to respond back. And they have to still use that pattern of when to use kuheha, hekta, abetu, nupa, wakwa, 1L, 1 new one. Okay, so they have to respond back. Then I moved on to, we work with chanashna, right? When you usually do something. I think if you click, it should move something. Oh, don't play that. Yeah. So when I ask something, it moves and you have to physically move that item to wherever that time place is. So we ask each other. So they're sitting with their own, on their own table, and I'm asking at my own table. So they have the picture card and put them where it would go. So we did Donghong, it's a general statement. So if it's a general statement, it will go on the outside. If it's a specific one, I'm asking, or if we're telling, then it will go on the ones on the inside. So if you click, it should start. So, Doha, Mania to China, Wichi, Nashka, LaValla. And we already been working with the I form and U form. Then look. Doha, Mania to China, but Doha Shna, Bahinde. And Toka, Sax, Shun, we China, Idoa, and I made that word up, so I couldn't find one in the dictionary, so I made that one up. It made sense to me. Idoa, me, except. PYA, then China, Hopawi, China, Chomplasta, Ashkata, Biwashkata. So we work with that. And that's a certain time of day, one month in October, right? And we can always change when that is. Okay, next one. Is that it? Well, I'm done. So if you want, later I'll have this up here, you can come up and look at it. Oh, so if you didn't know it, this is Michael Barr, he's my husband. And since I worked in college, now he's my boss.
Only at work. And she's my boss. And she's a hard act to follow. I mean, this is just awesome what she's done. All of the stuff you're seeing on there, she created all of it. Just blows my mind that I'm not that creative. What I want to just end with is to share just a few things that I do in the classes that I teach. So LaValla and Helene work with the language classes, and I used to teach language classes with my colleague Black Moon, but now I primarily do other courses, so history and tribal government and various kinds of courses like that. So I just want to kind of give you a couple of ideas about some things that I do to kind of also really enhance the idea of identity, both individual and social. And of course, everyone in the room knows the importance of kinship, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with it, but I certainly talk a whole lot about kinship in my courses. And one of the things that I really do is go beyond, of course, just the use of the kinship terms, but I really focus on the values behind kinship and look at the attitudes and the behaviors that people use. And so if you just go ahead and these are just a couple of slides I pulled out from the things I use in class that are just kind of the things that I really talk about for people. That it's not about biology, right? Biology is important, but the relationships are constantly growing and changing throughout your life. And that's the way the Lakota system is designed to be, right? You always are going to be discovering new relatives and meeting new people that you incorporate into your kinship circle. And so it's an active force, right? You create those relatives. And so I spend a lot of time talking about that. Go ahead. And of course, the use of the terms, Slolwakiye. But again, always really emphasize the idea of responsibility and mutual obligations that the use of these terms entailed. So, when you use a term for a particular person, it's paired with another term that person's going to use in response, and there's a set of expected behaviors and attitudes that go with it. And so I really talk a lot about that in my classes. Go ahead. Next one. And of course I use, some of the standard kind of kinship things that I think we all use. I created these on my own, to kind of explain the traditional structure, right? So one of the big differences, of course, today is that very often we now would call our father's brother Lakshi, kind of following the Washichu system. But traditionally, that individual, any father's brother would have been an ate, which would have created all kinds of other brothers and sisters for us, where again today we kind of use cousin, right, for those individuals. So I talk about change and why that change happened with colonization and with all of these federal programs and so on. So it gives kind of a historical context. But there's really a logical structure behind the Lakota kinship system. It made sense. And so it's kind of teaching students that. Once you can figure out the structure, you can pretty much know which terms to use for anybody that you meet. Go ahead. You could just kind of walk through the next couple slowly. I won't go into detail about them, but just wanted to give you kind of an example of some of the things that I use when I explain these things. And this is one of those examples where the structure really helps people to understand, the niece and nephew and the son and daughter terms, which is based on, your siblings and whether your sibling is the same sex, right? Female, female, in which case your sister's children, if you're a female, are going to be son and daughter, whereas your brother's children we use the niece and nephew terms. And for a male, it's just the flip-flop, right? So here's a male, here's my brother, so his kids are my son and daughter, whereas my sister's kids are niece and nephew. So a lot of the students, they don't really know that, the structure behind it. And so I use something like this to help them understand that there really is a logical system behind it. Go ahead. And then this is kind of the big chart that shows that. Go ahead. And again, one of the things that I really stress is the idea of these kinship terms being reciprocal, that they're always paired. And if they understand them as pairs, it's much easier to figure it out if you weren't raised with it, right? So this particular chart is showing from a female perspectives, a female speaker's perspective. So if she calls someone like she, there's only one term that he's going to use in response, right? So that's a pair of terms. If she addresses someone as Tawini, again, there's a specific term that's going to be paired with that. And so I teach those pairs, and then once they've learned the pairs, then again I talk about the reciprocal relationship between those relatives. And you can go to the next one there. And so here I really find Ella Deloria's work that she did in interviewing elders back in the 1920s and 1930s very useful in helping to kind of explain this. And so she said that there are really three components that one needed to know to negotiate the kinship system. One, of course, you need to know the appropriate term, but another important thing is what proper mental attitude goes toward that particular kind of relative. So you have to control your thinking about that relative. And then that shapes your behavior toward that person, right? So you're not going to act toward your mother-in-law as a young man the same way you're going to act toward your own mother or your father or your cousin or your grandfather. So each of those pairs of relationships has a unique kind of nature to it, right? And so I really talk a lot about that. And if you go to the next slide, I had to create kind of a graphic to show that. Well, so again, the pairs just have a set of rights and obligations that go with them, and then of course attitudes and behaviors. And then putting that on the next slide onto a chart, and I won't go into detail about this, but basically the two green up here in the front, these are in-laws, and the two blue in the back, these are your family of birth. And then it's also divided this way. The upper portion are the respect relatives, and down here are your familiar relatives. And so when you move from back here, where your parents are located, and you move across the top up here, the respect toward these kinds of relatives increases to the point where you get here, where it's a man and his mother-in-law, who traditionally, of course, didn't even speak to one another or look at one another out of respect. So that's the extreme respect relationship up here. And then moving along this other scheme, it increases in terms of familiarity. with the extreme relationship being siblings-in-law, that I can tease my sisters-in-laws and they can tease me very aggressively, right? So again, it's kind of explaining where every kind of relative falls within the scheme. So, you know, for example, if we look up here, I have opposite sex sibling and cousin. So from my perspective, that would mean my sisters and my female cousins. And those are respect relatives. I don't talk very freely with them after, you know, about the age of 12 or so. Again, in the traditional culture, and that's what I really get people to think about, is that it's more than just terms, but there was a whole, you know, cultural value system that went with that based on that idea of respect. Go ahead. And then to demonstrate that, I use a lot of recordings or texts from people describing it. And I'll share one of those with you that I like to use in class. It's a recording that was made in 1970 of Felix Kilsberg, the gentleman right here. This is Noah Hashorns over here. And Felix was originally from the Little Oak Creek area, which is southwest of Little Eagle, and married Alice Irondog from Bullhead, and then moved over to the Bullhead community. And all the older people in the Bullhead community remember him for a couple of reasons. One is that he was a singer, and he, you know, knew a lot of the old songs. And then in the morning, they said you could hear him singing. He would, you know, get up before dawn and he would start singing, and everyone living in cabins at that time could, you know, hear him along the creek. And he was blind as well. You can see he's wearing dark glasses there and has a cane. And then Noah Hashorns, just a quick note on him, he's one of the last elders at Standing Rock that knew how to make bows in the old way. The one person that we have today that really still does that learned from Noah Hashorns. So what you're going to see is a transcription of a short text, or it's a text now, but a recording of Felix that was made in 1970. So if you go to the next slide, it should play. So I think that's the last one. You can tell the problem with the cassette tape from 1970, right? So we played it so much that you could barely hear some sections of it. So we had transcribed it before that. But I really like those kind of things because you have, that speaker describing it, and the values of the culture really come out in the things that he was saying. I also like to use some text. In this case, we didn't have a recording of Gabe, but he wrote this for us and then worked with me to transcribe it for the students, and we used it in a class that we were co-teaching. This is Gabe Blackmoon, who taught at the college with me for, about 12 years, I think, and we recently lost him in March of last year. Really miss him. But this was, we kind of decided, well, let's have him write about what it was like growing up, to share some important things in his life. And I know we don't have time, so I won't go through the whole thing, but this is, him kind of describing one of the hardest things he went through when he was growing up, was the loss of his father. And then he goes on from there. You can just kind of slowly go through those to, describe the years after that, how his grandma and his mom would send him out to pick berries and, other kinds of things. So again, it's really a nice description of family life and of the relationships, between different kinds of relatives. So these are kind of things are really always the core for, the classes that I teach. Yeah, go ahead. We don't have too much time left. But so again, he kind of finishes up there. It's just kind of a very nice description of kinship. The last few slides I wanted to share with you were some old songs. So I've been able, I really think it's important to bring back a lot of the old kinds of materials that have been taken away to museums and things like that. And so I've been working to bring, those things back to the college, where they can be a resource, not only for us at the college, but for community members and so on. And this particular kind of theme is talking about leadership, which of course I use in my class on tribal government to talk about traditional government and really look at the values behind a leader, how they chose a leader in the old days, that you didn't elect yourself, right, and go around and start campaigning like today, but as he describes in this text, the people are watching you, they see what kind of a life you lead, and if they feel that it meets the values, then you're chosen for that kind of position. This particular text was a recording from Ben Black Bear Sr. Go ahead, LaValla. And one more. Okay. And so then another thing that I like to use to really bring out those values are the old chief songs. And so we're going to play just in the last few minutes here. There are 4 songs that we'll play for you. To set it up, this is the song of Charging Bear, or John Grass, that you see pictured here. He lived in the Lakota community. I'll be one ahead there. And this was recorded. The singer's name was used as a shield. Oh, no, not this one. It Shoots First. And it was recorded in the period 1911, 1914. So this is over 100 years old, this recording. Oh, it's not working. So you got to set the time there. The reason we have to set the time is it's blocks of like 3 or 4 songs together. We haven't, been able to. Yeah, you go ahead. Okay, click, and then click. You got to stay on the arrow and click the arrow. There you go. So, those songs are just powerful, right? And they have these wonderful, wonderful words that express those values. This is a Two Bears song, so from Volney's community of Cannonball. Was one of the important leaders of the last part of the 1800s. Sorry. Oh, okay. So click on that and then put your time. Okay, click. Okay, and then go straight to your arrow without reading the thing. And again, just think about the power of those words, right? That it's extolling how he goes along with the decisions of the people. He never goes in a different direction. He does exactly what the people want. Go ahead. The last two are songs associated with Sitting Bull. The first is a recording by Used as a Shield from Standing Rock, recorded in 1912. They said that Sitting Bull sang this song when he rode around the camp in the 1880s when the government was meeting with the tribe and trying to get them to sign the agreement that would lead to the breakup of the Great Sioux Reservation. And of course he opposed that. And that this song was associated with that he would ride his horse around the circle and that he would try and remind people with the song of why he held the perspective that he did about opposing the breaking up of the reservation. So if we go to the next slide and then just hit the sound, it should play. And the last song is Felix Kills Pretty Enemy. just like to thank everybody for attending, and Helene will say a few final words. So we appreciate your attention.
Ja, jag hittade här uppe i Kinship. Man blir chakleska med machamna. Wakbawa spermata. Na ja lahan Sitting Bull College kta Washington. Alla voyena voychikana glahonshami. Elija tokata gelana glahamani. Na ja wakhan abjache ashna abeti oila. Tokar ashna wachikaka khamnashna. Yushya tokata gel glahamani. Na we talking about Bisha, we talked it and Mata. You can learn better to Yomapi. Brain charging clock now. Charge a blood. Many are not lida, takuichu. Ijahina echeta. Lakota lakape. Hecheta. LTB, which I'm going to copy shata, you have my picture. Wopili chicha. I have an English touch. Alana, Takushnisti, Egletile, Monakavantas, Yachimata, Una, the Chil Lumakadia. And Daya Hicha, Wopili chicha. Washichi, I honing circle equally much. Red Scaffold, Community El Mata, and Manina, Brian. Lakota, Nakota, Oichik, the Nanarti, Monipi, come from Shine River Reservation.